Welcome to Brainthropology. Let's talk about our amazing brain and the issues that get us stuck. We all have those moments where life gets overwhelming. It can be related to injury or illness, or an issue with your kids, or just because life is crazy and we need a little help and encouragement. Our team of therapists, expert guests, and clients are here to deep dive into the topics that matter most. We will share information with our listeners that encourages, educates, and empowers.
This episode is brought to you by Galaxy Brain and Therapy Center, helping clients live their best lives by implementing strategies such as those discussed in this podcast. Galaxy Brain and Therapy Center is located in Ann Arbor, Michigan, serving southeastern Michigan for in-person and community-based services. Out-of-state virtual and teletherapy services available for OT, PT, speech, mental health, and mindfulness. Check out their website at galaxybraincenter.com. Welcome to Brainthropology. I'm Courtney Wang, your host, and today we're going to talk about vision. It's one of our dominant senses, and it's very important, and there's so many things that can go well with it and so many things that can go wrong. Today we're going to talk about issues that go beyond just nearsighted, farsighted, and the basic vision issues into that eye operating system. There are so many ways that in an injury, the visual system can be impacted. When there's an accident, there's usually a whiplash motion to the head hitting the back of the head, and that's where your visual system is. Also, there are kiddos who come in with developmental disabilities or too much screen time, and environmental factors can impact it as well. That's why I'm so happy to have our guests here today, Alison and Dr. Carder. Welcome.
Thank you.
So we always like to start our podcast with a positive. So I would love to hear from you, Dr. Carder, a positive from your day.
Wow, this weekend was amazing. It was a beautiful November weekend of sun. So I got to enjoy a campfire with my family and some nice walks this weekend, some good college football, and it was beautiful.
Awesome. And Alison, what's your positive?
My positive is just I'm so thankful to be here today and talk more about vision therapy and, being able to help our patients is why I love what I do.
Beautiful. And I'm happy to have you guys here. You guys, we have collaborated for years, and then I sent my own children to you, and I feel like we've had this conversation multiple times of how do I get people to understand the difference of what you do and what other people do to get the right kind of help. So first, I would like to ask Dr. Carder, what is your training, and can you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Absolutely. So for an optometrist, we go to our undergrad, get our undergrad degree. I went to Ohio State, which I know you don't get to hear a lot in Ann Arbor, but I went to Ohio State for optometry school. While I was there, I also earned a master's degree focusing on children with individual education plans or IEPs. So that kind of kicked off my passion for vision and learning and that whole process. Following optometry school, I did a residency out in Southern California where I had the opportunity to learn more about vision therapy, traumatic brain injury, and that binocular vision system of how the visual system can work really efficiently or not efficiently and can really impact people's lives on a daily basis.
Yeah, and your specialty, I think, is so amazing because there are people who usually do brain injury or people who do kids, and you guys seem to do both of them so well, which makes you an ideal guest here to kind of talk about that through the life spectrum, but also through standard development and through disability. So Alison, I would love to hear a little bit about your journey into vision therapy. I know it's a little bit more of an alternative path there.
It is a little different. I was in education for 15 years. I was a Montessori teacher. And I do feel that that has helped me transition to become a vision therapist because a huge component of the Montessori philosophy is follow the child. And I feel I do that with each patient individually. They might come to us with a same diagnosis like a convergence insufficiency or a TBI, but every patient responds different to vision therapy. So their path is a little bit different. Their length of sessions are a little bit different, how long they're with us, and just how symptomatic they are.
So Dr. Carder, this is the age-old question I've had for you of how do we explain the difference between optometry and ophthalmology?
$1,000,000 question. So the biggest difference with optometry and ophthalmology is that optometrists go to optometry school. And so we spend time knowing the entire human body, but we really focus on the visual system, the optics of the eye, the processing system of the eye and brain communication, where an ophthalmologist goes through medical school and then learns to do surgery. And so that's really the big differentiating factor between us most of the time, is that we are doing the primary eye care, and they are really focused on specific disease states that require surgery. Now, for me, I've become a developmental optometrist, and so that above just a typical optometrist was part of my residency, and part of my training after my residency was where we really hone in on the visual efficiency of the visual system, the processing part of the visual system. And so we refer to ourselves as developmental optometrists. So kind of how you alluded to, children develop at different stages. People with traumatic brain injury develop and go through that process. And so that's something that I really hone in on, is that whole developmental process.
Yeah, and that is something that I think is hard to find. When I look at your business name, you are Celine Optometry and Chelsea Eyeglass Company. It doesn't tell me necessarily that you do developmental optometry. How do you find someone who is a developmental optometrist if you have concerns?
Well, that's a great question. So sometimes it does take talking to peers, other parents that have been through the similar experience, or teachers. There are a few websites. COVD is the College of Optometry and Vision Development, and that is geared for developmental optometrists. There is the Neuro-Optometric Rehab Association, and they also work with quite a few developmental optometrists, more focused with the traumatic brain injury type population. But sometimes it is just kind of digging, and even someone that may not call themselves a developmental optometrist could have the training and the expertise to really dive into the visual system of looking at their eyes working as a team and tracking and focusing correctly, because that's really what you need to get into, no matter the age, to make sure that process is going correct.
Right. So can you explain to us a little bit, when I think of the eye doctor for myself, I think of that crazy machine where they're flipping lenses. It still looks the same and they want me to judge what's different, what's the same. What's the difference between your standard eye exam and one of your developmental eye exams, or I think I usually ask for your neurological eye exams?
Right. So a typical eye exam, yes, everyone thinks of the better one or two. I'm sure I'm getting the answer wrong. Someone's trying to trick me. I promise we are not trying to trick you. And all of my exams still do include those things, because step one is getting the best pair of optical correction. So whether that be with glasses or contact lenses. And then we also look at the health of the eye, and that too is part of a typical eye exam. What I really do in all of my comprehensive exams is then go a step deeper in looking at how those eyes work together as a team. Can they turn in and turn out in a correct fashion? Can they focus, meaning can they see clearly on a page in front of them? Can they transition that focus from far away, making it clear, up close, making it clear? And can they track? So that top to bottom, left to right sequence, as children, they need to learn that sequence. And so many kids don't learn that properly. In traumatic brain injury patients, that can be messed up. And so they need to relearn that process. And then that is a typical kind of more developmental or comprehensive eye exam. And then with those traumatic brain injury patients, we will also go a little bit more in depth in, are they seeing double vision, and do we need to do any type of prisms? Are they doing suppression, which is basically the brain shutting one eye off to protect them from seeing double? And then also those visual processing skills, those higher cognitive processing skills of, I see that shape, can I recognize it? Can I figure out what it is? Can I get it back through my visual system to write something down? And so that's those steps that I go through to really assess the whole person.
And it's amazing the changes that we've seen in mutual clients and even my own kids with identifying those issues, whether you need prisms or you need therapy with someone like Allison. It can be life-changing. We had a prior guest on here, Alice, And for her, she'll still say that you guys are the best thing that happened to her, because she wanted to go to rock concerts and she wasn't able to do that. But with working with you guys and then therapy strategies as well, she has a very fulfilling life, and you guys are a big piece of that puzzle for her. Yeah. So in what situations or conditions would you say would be red flags to say, hey, you would need a developmental eye exam or this neuro eye exam that's a very comprehensive eye exam?
Well, from a traumatic brain injury standpoint, I think that anyone who's had concussions, had a stroke, had any type of neurological insult would benefit from that, because a lot of times you don't know what you can't see, you don't know what you don't know. And so you may be dealing with some of these symptoms, and there are a lot of helpful steps that we can give you, whether it be glasses or prisms or vision therapy or some basic exercises. From a pediatric standpoint, the American Academy of Optometry talks about kids should have their first exam in their first year of life, and then ideally at 3 years old and 5 years old and every year that they're in school. And so what that does is allow you to get, as a parent, a baseline of what can my child do, what can they see, how is their visual system functioning. And so the red flags that we often will ask about when we're first seeing a new patient is, how is their reading going? Are they learning their sight words? Are they skipping and rereading lines when they read? Do they rub their eyes or complain about their head hurting? Do they ever say that words jump or move or wiggle on the page, or sometimes see double? It's shocking to me, and probably more so the parents, when I ask that question, and how many kids say, oh yeah, my mom has two heads often, or the page that I'm reading has two of the same word all the time. But kids don't know how to articulate that that's how they're seeing. And so it's so important to get those comprehensive exams every year that they're in school. But certainly with those symptoms, we often see a lot of kids with ADD and different, they label them as blank learning disorders. And oftentimes there is a vision component. And so if we can remove those visual roadblocks, that can be a tremendous help for those kids. So there's lots of signs that would cause you to need that comprehensive eye exam. And our hope, and thanks for hosting us here, because our hope is that more families realize that this should be your normal back to school checklist. This should be something that, you get your teeth cleaned and you get your primary care doctor and you get your eyes checked, to have that good comprehensive exam.
Well, and this one hits home so much for me, because I feel like my children were in first grade and kindergarten when the pandemic hit and we flipped to virtual school. So I don't think we had done an eye exam outside of the pediatrician's office. And then as my kids are progressing in a pandemic and virtual learning, they ended up jumping lines and doing these things. So I went through and I do very basic smooth pursuit test and a little bit of different testing with them. And I'm like, they can't even track smoothly side to side. Of course they can't read if their eyes are jumping when I try smooth pursuits. But I knew you guys and said, hey, will you look at my daughter? And you were able to find issues. My second daughter, who ended up telling me the ball was blurry in tennis, I thought she just wanted glasses. I'm not going to lie. I think she just wanted to be like her sister. I bring her to you and you're like, she has the same issues as your older daughter. And I was floored. My favorite moment was you had your finger out or whatever tool you were using and you were saying, when do you see double? And hers was about 13 inches away from her face. As a mom who does this for a living, I never thought to ask her, do you see double when things are this far away, which is everything she's doing.
Right.
But my big concern after having my own children go through this is, how much has a pandemic hurt our children's vision? And, a lot of people have always said screen time is bad for kids. Can you potentially explain to us a little bit why that screen time can be damaging to that visual operating system?
Yeah, absolutely. I do think we're going to find probably years down the road how impactful all of that virtual learning was on these children. But with screen time, they hold it typically much closer than they should. I teach all of our patients about what's called the Harmon distance. And so you should actually, stick out your arm and put your fist on your face, and it should be no closer than your elbow. And so that's a good rule of thumb. You have that measurement tool with you wherever you go. But that should be how far their screens should be from them, at least. It could be further away. But even at that distance, it's requiring their focusing system to work so much harder than it was ever meant to focus. It's requiring those eyes to turn in a coordinated fashion. And then that whole top to bottom, left to right. On a screen, that visual pathway and that scan path is so much different than if they've actually got paper, and how they do that top to bottom, left to right. So I am certainly seeing a lot more vision issues with these younger kids post, I don't know for post-pandemic certainly, but post a lot of virtual learning. And so, my kids always roll their eyes, but they know that when they get home from school, they do not get to get on screens. They've had plenty of screen time. And so as a parent, that's very challenging to do. But I always talk to people about, if they really want to watch a video or they want to do something, it's much better if they could do it from a TV than for a screen up close.
So Alison, can you tell us a little bit about some of the trends that you're seeing in vision issues with kids, maybe over the past 5 years?
Yes. And I think I've been working with Dr. Carder for the past 5 years, actually. And so starting, tracking and, it didn't seem that there was much eye fatigue happening, but now when they come in, they are exhausted. Their focusing system has been working all day. And so sometimes when they come to me late in the afternoon, I can only get so much out of them. Your children came early in the day. Well, one of them, I guess. One came a little later. But in the morning is the best time. They wake up, their eyes are fresh, they can come on in and we can do all their exercises. Then they might be a little more tired for school, but at least I get what I need out of them. So, I would say the increased screen time, and often I talk about that because, we've had them come in looking at an iPad as they come in, and I really say how important it is to have that break from not watching a movie in the car coming in to see us. So I do think over the last 5 years since I have been doing this, there has been so much change in just obviously with school and with the screen time as well.
Well, they do so much more screens in school, and that was
Definitely
my pet peeve is the pandemic. My kids didn't know how to use an iPad. They didn't even know how to turn on my TV. They're very efficient in these things now. But speaking to that fatigue, I remember my kids were doing that exercise that you guys have for eye suppression where they're reading and they've got a flipper focusing near and far.
Right.
And it has different colors film and you wear glasses so that if you're not using one eye, it'll turn brown in one area. And they could never do that at night, which was such a challenge for us as a family because when do you have time to do homework? Right. It's at night. So we had to change it around and I had to bribe them. I was like, if you get it done in the morning while mommy's working out, then you're going to get a prize at the end of the week. But that was the only way to fit that one in because that was such a challenge. I mean, it's hard for me to do that exercise.
Yes, right.
And to do that at night was a total no-go and led to tears. And so we had to flip it around and think through some of your
advice. And I'm glad that you said that because often, I'll say, when do you do the flipper? Oh, when I go to bed. Bring book to bed. I'm laying down. And so we talk about that too, because it's important to sit up, to be able to focus on what you're reading. And that we can talk more about a flipper later, but with that accommodation. And so by 9:00 at night, it's not going to happen.
And Dr. Carder, what are some common things that you would see for someone after a brain injury? What are those kind of visual things that maybe I'd like for our listeners to maybe hear something maybe they have that they would know they could get some help for?
Absolutely. So a lot of the things that we do see in the pediatric population often mirrors what we see in the traumatic brain injury patient, but it's just that much more intense. And so oftentimes we will see trouble with those eyes working together. So either their eyes are pulling in too much and it's creating a lot of headache and strain, or they're drifting out. And so it results in a lot of double, a lot of focusing trouble. I just worked with a football player not too long ago, and his headaches had gotten better, his dizziness has gotten better, both of those very common with these traumatic brain injury population, but everything was blurry. He couldn't read, he couldn't pay attention to the board in school. And so the nice thing is there are great tools that we have, and Alison is fabulous at this, to really help those patients through some of that stuff. The other thing I think we see a lot with this traumatic brain injury population is some of the visual processing. And I think it's really hard, especially post-injury, to articulate what that feels like. But they come in and just say, I just can't do the things I used to be able to do, and I can't multitask like I used to be able to do. I just have this brain fog that's just kind of hanging around and not helping. I get more frustrated and irritated. I get anxious. And so even though it's not just us that's going to help them, you guys at Galaxy are fabulous about helping them. And even sometimes a counselor, a social worker, someone is really helpful. But I think it really does require a team to help these people. But a lot of those things can stem back to, if you can't see things very well, 80% of our life is actually through the visual system. And so if we can't see those things, we can't process those things correctly, it is incredibly frustrating for those patients.
Well, and that's funny. I have this conversation convincing people to go and see you guys all the time, talking about how the eyes are that dominant sense. And so for me, or maybe for a listener who doesn't have these symptoms to understand, I tell them, if I have my eyes slightly crossed and I try to walk around the room and look for a piece of paper, it is very uncomfortable, unsettling, and fatiguing. And it's really interesting. There are some eye questionnaires I've used in the past that talk about, do you feel anxious walking into a grocery store? Do you feel anxious in crowds? Do you feel, and anxiety can be a huge part, and the visual system can be the trigger, because it took this world of certainty that you could predict and understand with good vision. You take it, that dominant sense, and you make it just a little off, and it gets really, really uncomfortable, like you're walking on a boat or like you're walking around with cross eyes. And so when I kind of explain to people that even I feel really overwhelmed just walking across the room and looking for a piece of paper with my eyes crossed just a little bit, then they kind of understand that it's a real thing, that it can impact more than just reading and the things that they think that it impacts.
Absolutely.
So we'll go through and maybe talk a little bit about the treatments that you guys have to offer, because we go through and we always identify things that are off with our clients, but our goal is ultimately to give you a fix. So Dr. Carder, what are some of the things that you can do outside of just the vision therapy piece for clients who are having some vision issues?
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, the first thing I do is check for glasses. There are many people that maybe were able to compensate for a very low grade prescription that, common person walking off the street, we would say, that's not really enough prescription that you need that. For a post-concussion patient, that can make a huge difference. Very small units of prescription can make a difference. So a lot of these people will come in and say, I've had an eye exam. They told me it's really small and I don't need it. And when I show them that prescription, it's amazing how much better they feel. So step one is often glasses or contacts or something. In some people, I will consider to do Prism. And so what Prism can do is help alleviate some of the pressure if their eyes are working too hard turning in, if they're working too hard turning out. Or we can use what's called a yoked prism. So when you get into these grocery stores, hear that all the time, that these big box stores, it feels so overwhelming. We can actually change their visual space a little bit. So we shift the visual space so that it's not so visually stimulating and feeling so intense. So we can use prisms for quite a few things. If they're a younger person, I tend to probably steer away from Prism, or my goal is to get them out of Prism, because my goal is for them to get back to, doing all the things that they love and not be dependent on a lot of different crutches. And so that's where we have certain computer programs, and that's certainly where I kick over to Alison, who's just fabulous at doing the vision therapy for these people.
Yeah, Alison, can you tell us a little bit about vision therapy? Because I think that would be a really hard concept for people to really envision, is how do your eyeballs lift weights? How do they do these little things? So can you explain what you work on in vision therapy?
Sure. So each session is 40 minutes. So they come in after they've seen Dr. Carder. Before we go through that process, then they start vision therapy with me. And there are a few standard preliminary exercises I have to do at the beginning to kind of see where they are. Of course, I already know their diagnosis, have their plan set. And then we just start working on, it's basically physical therapy for the eyes, right? And so I'm working on that convergence and divergence, your eyes turning in, your eyes resting out. And so each patient is a little bit different. Like I said earlier, they come in and sometimes they're having a great day, especially if it's a TBI patient, and I can push them a little bit more. I'll say to them, okay, you're going to get tired of this, but I'm going to ask you about 100 times during our session, how are you feeling? Because if they have a headache or they're getting dizzy, I have them rate that 1 to 10. And, we get to a point where, okay, I have to be cognizant now of they have to drive home, they have to go pick up their kids, they have to go to the grocery store, whatever they have to do. And so it's not just that 40 minutes with me. And some, don't drive themselves, or so they'll drive them, if they haven't driven themselves, then they're like, push me a little bit more. I can go home and go right to bed. Okay. But then there's some that, okay, I drove today, so I need to be aware of that. When someone comes in, like with the basic convergence insufficiency, we might see them for about 25 weekly sessions. And again, we have various activities. So a Brock string, which is sometimes I think that's like the exercise people hear when they hear, oh, vision therapy. It's a rope with some beads. So of course it's really exciting when they're like, oh, the Brock string. I've heard about the Brock string. And then we do the Brock string and no one's excited. But it's, again, working on that convergence and that divergence. We have something called the vectogram. Again, and most of these all are doing the same thing, but in various ways. We have fun. We have a trampoline. We have some strobe goggles. I throw balls at them. They get to catch them. Your daughters love those. We do a lot of directionality, working on letter reversals. We do something called arrows, which again, they might be on a balance board, and we might use a metronome. So the sessions really vary, but there's some things obviously that stay the same. The other component of that is the home therapy. So home therapy is really important. And actually this year we just started a vision therapy contract because it's a commitment. Like, it's important. So when you come in, this isn't just like, okay, I'm going to come. And I mean, there are some that I could talk to for hours. I love my patients. I love them and I love talking with them. But at the same time, I only have 40 minutes with them. So we need to do our work. Then they need to do their work at home. So we recommend about 4 to 5 times a week, about 15 to 20 minutes a day, depending on what they're working on. And and every week we come in, we check in on them and, how you're doing. And so then in those first 5 to 8 weeks, I guess I should say 5 to 8 weeks throughout their whole plan, they see Dr. Carder for a vision therapy check. And so she monitors their progress. She and I talk weekly about all of the patients and where they are. And then she'll plan, okay, 6 to 7 more visits, then see her again, or, 6 more visits and then graduation. So, our ultimate goal is to graduate to help, especially with TBI, alleviate any symptoms that we can. We're very upfront with patients, especially with TBI, being able to, correct a lot of the symptoms that they've had. But there are some that they might have. And so again, then it's giving those tools to be able to, like Alice, we knew what her goal was, right? I mean, she had a lot of goals, but that one. And so when she started going to those concerts and coming in and telling me about them, I mean, that was the best thing, to be able to know that. And then she'd still say, well, I still can't, and so we would still work. And then we got to a place where we're like, you know what? We've asked everything of your visual system and, but she knew that. And, like you said, I mean, she really had made tremendous strides.
Well, and she was a fun one where she was going to concerts and found specifically, it was such a specific issue with her vision, red flashing lights were bothering her. And I was like, Alice, I think you should go talk to Dr. Carder and just ask about films and stuff like that. So can maybe you even mention a little bit about colors in the visual system?
Yeah, absolutely. So we, for Alice in particular, we did some filtered glasses. And so there's a little bit of science, but there's a little bit more of an art to the filters. And so a lot of times we have to put the filters in front of the patient. And when I say filters, basically what we're doing is we're tinting the glasses a specific color. And so for some people, it helps filter out lights that are bothersome for them. For some people, it enhances contrast and allows that visual system to work a little bit more efficiently. And so we will put in different filters, and I'll do that during my evaluations. Sometimes I'll have them doing it for an extended period of time in vision therapy with Alison, and to see how they function. And that's one of those situations where I say it is an art, because we will put them in and have them do a bunch of activities, and then we'll get a pretty immediate response of, oh no, I don't like that. Or, wow, this makes me feel so much better. That little pinch that I had at the tip of my forehead just seems like it's relieved now. And so filters can work really great, especially when there's specific needs, like red flashing lights.
Yeah. And what I love about your practice is this holistic approach, because I have had clients go to places where there's a big ophthalmology center in Ann Arbor, and I will have patients who have what I would call poor smooth pursuits, where their eyes are jumping, and I can see that they're clearly, the muscles around the eyes aren't moving them in a way that is functional for that client. Or they'll have nystagmus and their eyes are actually vibrating at times. And they will go to the center and they will say, your eyes are fine. And they are right. Their eye health, the eyeball itself is perfectly fine, but the muscles and everything else that works around that eye system is really what I had concerns about in those things. And so you guys look at that eye operating system, and you're looking at, are prisms right? But you don't want to splint for life. You really are trying to figure out, can we do a workout to make it better first? And if that doesn't work, do we go back to this? Can we look at filtered light for these people? And to me, that's just such a comprehensive approach that is not done at very many places. And that's why I wanted to let people know through this podcast that these services are out there. Sometimes you just have to know the phrases or the questions. And so those resources you mentioned in the beginning, we'll put them in the show notes. Maybe someone can find the right person for their visual needs through that process. So I would love to hear from each of you, one of your biggest success stories that really makes you smile. So Dr. Carter, who, or not necessarily the person's name, but can you give us an example of a success for you?
Oh, I have so many that it makes me so proud to be able to do this stuff. And I love what we do because we have so many people that we can impact. I have a gymnast that I worked with several years ago, and she came in. She's a fabulous gymnast, but she was pretty young. And we realized that she was seeing double, and beam was her main event. So as a parent, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is very dangerous. And so she would say, yeah, I would see two beams. And so I'm tumbling on the beam, but had to kind of estimate where I'm going to be. I'd sometimes shoot in the middle, and she would sometimes say, well, I feel like this eye was a little better today, so I'd shoot toward that side of the beam. There's not a lot of room for error in beams. And she saw double in school, in gymnastics, in everything that she did. And she was, they came in for a comprehensive exam, but hadn't really talked much about the double. She was young enough that she kind of assumed that that's how she was supposed to see. This wasn't this patient, but I've had another patient say, yeah, I see double. And the mom was shocked and said, how come you've never told me? And he said, well, I looked on my partner's paper and they see the same thing. Kids, again, don't know what they should see and how their visual system should work. So this kid was young enough that she just assumed that's how things were, and she had to work through that. But she came every week to vision therapy. She was such a hard worker, and by the end, she was doing amazing. Her double had resolved, and we often see this, that it wasn't, when I first got into this field, this wasn't necessarily on my radar, but their sports performances tend to get quite a bit better after their system works more efficiently. And you can imagine, if you can judge depth better, if you can react faster, you're going to do better. And so she actually just got a scholarship for college for gymnastics. So it was very exciting news. And so it's so great to be able to help these kids and these adults go through life and function more efficiently, because it's such a huge impact for their lives.
Yeah, I feel like you guys are such a sister company because we love what we do so much. And My kids have just adored seeing you guys. Both of them cried when they left Alison, quite honestly. Alison, can you tell us one of your big stories?
We had a patient, I think then she might have been about 9, but again, the double vision. And oh my gosh, I remember when she came and everything was double. She played sports and she's, I see 2 nets for field hockey. I see 2 nets for basketball and 2 goals when I'm, kicking the soccer ball. And so her mom's like, what? And she's like, well, I just close one eye and then it goes away. And so she learned to compensate. And then the mom's like, the more she would talk, the mom's like, oh yeah, her teacher said, she'll cover one eye when she's reading or when she's in school. And so we worked with her for over a year, which isn't typical of a child in vision therapy. That's more along our TBI patients. But in every week, I would give an update. I talk with the parents at the end of each session, and her mom would just be like, is it still the same? And I'm like, yes, but we're working on it, and every week. And she'd come Saturday mornings and we would just keep working. And then one day we were doing a lot with the Brock string. And so I was putting a prism in front, trying to make the bead one. And then we'd get to a place where we'd sit in an exam room and she'd have to stare at the screen. And then we'd time how long she could get the image into one when it was double. And so we kept doing these exercises and she'd work on things at home. And she was a little bit different case, right? Because we were mainly really at this point now working on the double. And the day that it broke, it was like, oh my gosh, like everyone was crying because we were so happy and it was the best. And so I know, we had seen her since with checks with Dr. Carder afterwards and still playing her sports. And I mean, those are that right there is just like when you can help them get back to, and of course, again, she didn't know what she didn't know. So, and I remember when Dr. Carder was telling me about her before she started. And she said, oh, well, how many screens do you see, in Dr. Carter's exam room? And she's like, well, 2. Like it wasn't even a question. So yeah, that's and I still reference her a lot, just because, I mean, that was my first, one of my first, patients, and that whole year that we worked together. So yeah, that was quite amazing.
And it can be slow progress. And sometimes you don't see it until you look back. And that's one thing that I love that you guys do are those standardized exams. Because as a mom, I am trying to tell my kids to do their exercises, but I can't control their eyes. It's not like a softball swing where I can get behind them and see the bat moving. And so I had to kind of go on a little faith that my kids were doing their exercises. And when we went into our eye checks where Dr. Carder, you would do those follow-ups to see how they were improving, what we should focus on in therapy with Alison. And you're like, holy moly, their scores have gone up so high. And now they're in the 95th percentile and they came in the 5th percentile. So I know there are some places that don't really do vision therapy, but there's so much when you can prove it through the standardized test. But then the results that my kids had, and I'm going to invite our kids into the studio, or my kids into the studio, so that they can tell us all a little bit about their experience with vision therapy. Now we have with us my daughters, Lainey and Zoe. And Lainey, I'm hoping you can tell us a little bit about why we started vision therapy with you.
I played tennis with my friend Audrey, and I noticed after a few practices that the tennis ball that my coach Pedro was hitting was getting a bit blurry.
Yeah, so then we said, oh, we should go see Dr. Carder. And then she said, yeah, you have some issues. And we learned that you saw double whenever you were seeing things that were about a foot away from your face. So we did exercises for about 6 months, I believe. And then what happened?
I started getting better because the tennis ball wasn't as fuzzy.
Well, and I think, did your reading get better? And you even marked on your last survey with Dr. Carder that you even felt more confident in school, didn't you?
Mm-hmm.
Now, Zoe, I'd love to hear a little bit about you. Why did we first decide to do vision therapy with you?
We started because we noticed I was skipping lines when I was reading.
And then we did your vision therapy. And how often did we do your exercises?
We did the one with Miss Allison. We did those every Friday, and then we did the homework every day.
And did your homework pay off? What did you get through your homework?
in my homework, I got better, and I started, now, I don't skip lines, not at all. But, I still skip some, but it's, better than I used to be.
Do you think you enjoy reading more?
Yeah, I definitely do enjoy reading more.
Yeah, I think that that's become her nighttime thing. So it was a challenge, and now every night she's got the lights on in her room reading a book. So I think it was a big success for both of my girls. So thank you both.
Awesome.
So as we're wrapping up today, I wanted to know, what are some maybe screening tools, or is there anything that people, our listeners, could reference to know when they maybe needed to look for more help?
So one tool that we use that would be a great tool for people to reference is the Convergence Insufficiency Symptom Survey. So it's a quick 15-question survey that will be able to assess how that visual system is working. And it can be used on all ages, and just a really easy way to screen for some common vision problems that happen. And then the really nice thing about screening for those things and seeking treatment is because with vision therapy, we are teaching the eye and brain new pathways and solidifying the pathways that maybe aren't quite as strong. And so in therapy, we always talk about we want to build the strength of things. And so, yes, we are making those muscles stronger. And then we want to work on the efficiency of that and ultimately the automaticity of that, meaning that the kid or the adult just will do things without having to think about it. And I remember when Zoe came in, she had even said that it was just a lot of work to sit and read and remember things. And now I was thrilled to hear when you were done that you enjoyed reading. You would grab a book for fun, which is often the transformation that we'll see, that these kids that struggle, even both of my kids have been through vision therapy, struggled with reading, kind of fought it, and then became one of those kids that actually grabbed a book once in a while to read for fun. And so that's a really nice way to be able to help people.
And we can link in our show notes all of the surveys and the resources that we mentioned today so that people will have something to reference. So as we wrap up today, I thought I would invite my daughters to read this that's in big, bold font right here to wrap up our show.
Be courageous and move forward in your day with hope, joy, and purpose.
Thank you.
While we love what we do and are as passionate as they come, the information on this podcast and discussion is for educational purposes only and should not replace professional medical advice. Please consult your own healthcare provider if you are seeking medical advice, diagnoses, or treatment for you or anyone else. We do our very best to provide correct information, but please understand science and medicine is ever-changing. We welcome feedback, comments, suggestions, or correction of errors. This disclaimer applies to any guest or contributors to the podcast or blog.